For the first time ever, there are now more ETFs listed than US companies in the market, and a large part of this is due to the fact that covered call ETFs have absolutely exploded in popularity over the last few years. What we're looking at here charted out is the net inflows into these funds. 2025 has been a record year. And over the last year, I've been building out the Dividendology covered call ETF database with in-depth data on over 65 different covered call ETFs. But unfortunately, what I found is that the vast majority of these covered call ETFs destroy value, as well as continue to pay out less and less in dividends over time. That's not a good sign. This is very clearly a dangerous asset class, at least if you don't know what to look for. So in this video, we're going to be looking at 4 covered call ETFs that have high dividend yields that also have the ability to continue to grow their net asset value over time. I recently interviewed the fund manager for one of these ETFs, and he actually believes that his fund will continue to grow its dividend payout over time. That's unheard of for covered call ETFs. Now, is it really important for a covered call ETF to grow its net asset value? What if we only care about the dividends? Well, we have to understand covered call ETFs generate income by selling call options on the assets they hold. So to put it very simply, if the net asset value shrinks over time, the ETF has fewer assets to write calls on. Fewer assets equals lower premiums equals smaller dividend payments. On the other hand, if net asset value is growing, there's more income potential, there's more upside potential. And something we have to be aware of is that if net asset value falls too far, the ETF cannot recover during market rallies because the calls it writes cap the upside. This is why we see some funds like QYLG, which has existed for over 10 years, slowly but gradually continue to decline further and further. This is what we're trying to avoid. So let's look at 4 funds that have the potential to do exactly that. And first up on our list is GPIQ, the Goldman Sachs NASDAQ 100 Premium Income ETF. If we look at this fund in the last year, it's actually up by 12.69%. And if we look at it on a total return basis, it's actually up over 25%, outperforming the market. If we look at the trailing 12-month dividend yield, it's sitting at 9.37%, so it's been making large dividend payments. Let's go ahead and analyze the historical dividend payments. Using ticker data, we can automatically import this into our spreadsheet. We'll plug in GPIQ and hit enter, and all the data will load in. Now, the first payment they made was in December of 2023, and we can see the distributions for a covered call ETF since inception have been relatively stable. We can see during the tariff scare right here, the payments made were a little bit smaller. Again, that's because net asset value went down. But as the market recovered, net asset value climbed, and as a result, the payments went higher as well. And in fact, the most recent payment made in early October was the largest distribution they've ever had. So we understand how net asset value plays a major role in the actual amount they're able to distribute to shareholders. But the real question is, do we understand the way the fund is structured? Because that will ultimately determine whether or not they're able to continue to grow net asset value over time. So let's dig into it. If we look at the fund's fact sheet, we can see things like, yes, it seeks consistent monthly distributions, diversifying source of income. But if we really start to dig into things, here's what we'll find out. They provide equity exposure to the NASDAQ 100 index and dynamically sell call options, allowing for participation with rising markets and potential outperformance in negative to flat markets. So the underlying index is the NASDAQ 100. Obviously, that's very relevant because how the fund performs heavily depends on how the NASDAQ performs. Now, a lot of covered call ETFs can still see net asset value declining even if their underlying continues to climb higher. So how do we know that won't continue to be the case for a fund like GPIQ? Well, let's jump over to the Dividendology covered call ETF database. Again, you can download this for free at the link in the description. Right here, we can see GPIQ. If we scroll all the way over, here's what we need to pay close attention to. These 2 key metrics right here, out of the money calls and the portfolio options coverage. I harp on how important these are all the time. But essentially, let's make sure we understand options moneyness. There's typically 3 types of option strategies. We have at the money calls, in the money calls, and out of the money calls. And we'll be brief because I've covered this before, but at the money calls will typically generate the highest premiums, but caps almost all of the upside. So it can be decent in sideways or slightly bearish markets. In the money calls, generate the highest premium, but it sacrifices upside completely, so it's more defensive, better in bear markets. But then we have out of the money calls, typically lower premiums generated, but it allows more of the upside, which is better in bullish markets. And what do we know about the market over time? The market goes up, especially if you're following an index such as QQQ or the S&P 500. So based on what we know about GPIQ, it makes complete sense for them to use out of the money calls. But perhaps even more importantly is the portfolio options coverage. GPIQ is incredibly unique in this instance. Now, what we have to remember is covered call ETFs generate income by selling call options on the assets they hold. So portfolio options coverage is telling us what percentage of those assets do they write options on. If it's 100%, they can generate more premium income, but they're going to severely limit their upside. GPIQ does not want to do that. It's why they don't write options on 100% of their portfolio. This is why the fund says they dynamically sell call options. Essentially, they're telling us they have active management. The amount of options they write can heavily depend on what they're actually seeing in the market, and it can be as low as 25% or as high as 75%. Either way, they're leaving room for the upside. If it's only 25%, yes, they'll generate less premium, but they can take part in a lot of the upside. So yes, net asset value has grown historically speaking for this fund, but again, that doesn't always necessarily mean it will continue to grow in the future. But because we can see they track an underlying index that has historically done very well, and those companies will continue to grow earnings and free cash flow over time, and because we can see they use out-of-the-money calls, and they limit themselves to only 25% up to 75 portfolio options coverage, GPIQ clearly has the ability to continue to grow their net asset value over time, which again will continue to support those very nice distributions they've been making. On top of this, the expense ratio is only 0.29%, which is considerably lower than what we see from a lot of other of these funds. Next on our list, we have probably the most unique fund we'll be looking at today and the most unique covered call ETF that I've analyzed in quite some time, and that's ICAP, Infrastructure Capital Equity Income Fund ETF. And this is not a popular ETF. Assets under management are only around 70 million. Year to date, we can see they're up about 2.7%, and if we look at them on a total return basis, it's closer to around 8.23%. Now, we can see the yield on a trailing 12 months basis is about 8.5%. And if you're paying close attention, you've probably already written off this fund because look at the expense ratio. 3.19%. But don't worry, that's not the actual expense ratio, at least in my opinion. That's highly misleading. Before we dig into the fund, let's address why the expense ratio looks this way. If we go to the fact sheet, you can see the gross expense ratio right here listed as 3.19%, but there's a little note made right here. Let's see what it actually has to say. Gross expenses include other expenses. Other expenses is composed of interest charges on borrowings, dividends, and other expenses on securities sold short, which are excluded expenses. What does that mean? Well, one of the things we'll notice is if we read about the key features of this fund, they employ an option writing strategy and modest leverage, which is typically around 20 to 30% to enhance income while retaining upside market exposure. The key there is taking advantage of modest leverage. Because ICAP uses modest leverage on its assets to enhance income, the SEC requires funds to show the interest expense from that borrowing as part of the expense ratio, but that doesn't take into consideration the extra income that the leverage actually generates. So the result is we get a figure like this that looks inflated on paper. But what we can actually see is the management fee is just 0.8%. This is the number you would see for most other ETFs. This is why the expense ratio is so misleading for this fund, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the reasons that a lot of people I think write off this fund and the reason it might have lower assets under management. But once you understand why the expense ratio looks the way it does, you'll realize this fund has some pretty unique qualities that make it quite interesting. For example, look at the dividend history for this fund. Let's scroll all the way down. We can see the first payment was made in 2022, and it was 17.5 cents. Keep moving forward. The dividend payment grew to 18 cents. Move forward to the next year. It grew to 18.5 cents. Later that year, 19 cents. And what's interesting is they've been increasing the amount they're paying out in dividends every single quarter now for 4 consecutive quarters. 19.5 cents, 20 cents, 20.5 cents was the most recent payment. How in the world could a covered call ETF actually increase the amount it's distributing every single quarter? That's unheard of. That was a question I actually had along with a few others, so I actually interviewed the fund manager just a couple of weeks ago. I turned our conversation into a PDF, which you can download at the link in the description if you'd like to read it. But essentially what they do is they target a high yield through large cap common equity in use of convertible and preferred securities. So from my conversation with the fund manager, they're already focusing on holdings that typically have higher yields. Let's look at a few examples. We can see stocks like Philip Morris. We can see stocks like Chevron, Pepsi. Those are companies that already have relatively high starting yields, but they also hold some convertible and preferred securities, which again will have higher yields. But then on top of this, if we scroll down and zoom in, let's take a closer look at how this fund is structured. We can see ICAP right here. We can see they use out-of-the-money calls similar to GPIQ, and only 30 to 40% portfolio coverage. So they leave a lot of the upside uncapped. This is what allows the fund to grow net asset value over time, and as a result allows it to actually grow their dividend payments over time. So yes, the fund is only up about 2.7% year to date because it doesn't follow some of these tech indexes that have done so well in the last year, but the way it's structured undoubtedly gives it plenty of upside in the future to continue to grow its net asset value, and as a result we'll even see the distributions increase as well. Now we come to QYLG, the Global X NASDAQ 100 Covered Call ETF and Growth ETF. And we can see in the last year, yes, it's down by about 6.78%. On a total return basis, it's up close to around 18%. And if we look at year to date, it's actually up by about 8.62%. Now, there's a few things about this fund that make it a little bit confusing if you don't know what you're looking at. So let's take a moment to talk about it. To start, we can see the starting dividend yield for this fund is shown as 23.46%. That's a very high starting dividend yield. Why does it look that way? Let's take a closer look and look at the fund's distribution history with ticker data. Again, all this data will load in, and what we can see looks a little bit odd. We can see right here, in December of 2021, there was a massive distribution made, and then again, it looks like last year, in December of 2024, there was a massive distribution made. And obviously, this is going to significantly boost what the trailing 12-month dividend yield actually looks like. So what's going on here? Why is this the case? This is something I was writing about over on Dividendology.com the other day. If you're not a member of Dividendology, I put out a ton of free research. Be sure to check it out at the link in the description. But to understand why these payouts look the way they do, we have to understand how QYLG is structured. QYLG has a lot of upside potential because they only write calls on 50% of the portfolio. That's great if you want to see your net asset value continue to grow. But this is part of the reason that the trailing 12 months yield is so misleading. Here's why. To avoid being taxed at the corporate level, the fund must distribute at least 90% of its taxable income in realized capital gains to shareholders each year. So throughout the year, QYLG pays monthly option income distributions, which come from the call premiums it collects. But if the fund realizes additional capital gains from selling appreciated stocks, and those gains push its taxable income above what's already been paid out, then it's legally required to quote-unquote catch up by distributing the remainder before the end of the year. Again, this is to avoid being taxed at the corporate level. And this is the reason that we've now seen twice in the fund's history a massive distribution at the end of the year. Now, what's tricky and what you have to keep in mind is the fact that this distribution is paid out of the net asset value. So look right here. This is at the end of December in 2024. We saw a huge drop in the net asset value, in the share price. Why was that the case? Well, it's because the end of year distribution was made right there. They had to make a massive distribution, and so the net asset value declined at that time. So now all of a sudden, when you see these two large distributions made, you know it's because the fund actually did pretty well in those years. And when you look at it charted out over 5 years and you see massive one-time drops, you know it's because they made a large distribution. On top of this, if we look at the covered call ETF database, we can see they actually use at-the-money calls, a little bit different than the other funds, but only 50% portfolio options coverage. And then finally, we have SPYI, NEO's S&P 500 High Income ETF, in the last year up about 3.21%. And if we look at it on a total return basis, currently up about 16.5%. So pretty impressive performance all in all. And the trailing 12 months yield now is sitting close to 12%, around 11.57. So let's take a little bit of a dive into this fund. We can see they aim for high monthly income generation, as all these funds do. They look to have upside potential and capture a portion of the S&P 500's upside when the index rises. So it's following an index that historically has done very well. That's obviously something we want to see. And if we look at the database, we can see out of the money calls and typically around 75% to 100% portfolio options coverage. I think typically they're on the higher end of that because they are generating pretty large premiums. And if we look at the distribution history for SPYI, what we can see is actually very impressive stability when it comes to the amount they're distributing every single month. Again, the only real dip we saw was when we had the tariff scare back in April of this year, but it's a great sign that we saw those distributions actually recover. Now, along with this, there is something that makes SPYI somewhat unique, and that's taxes. For the most part, the monthly distributions made by SPYI are classified by the IRS as a return of capital. So let's look at an example of how this would actually impact you. Assuming you're a top 25% taxpayer in the USA, which would mean adjusted gross income between $85,000 and $150,000 per year. If you generate $50,000 of income per year with SPYI, you could expect to pay roughly $340 in ordinary income tax and about $450 in long-term capital gains taxes. For reference, that would save you a potential $7,710 if you compared SPYI taxes to how much you'd actually pay with JEPI. If you bump up the income you're generating to a higher degree and say you're a top 10% taxpayer in the USA, then compared to JEPI, SPYI could save you a potential $9,150 in taxes. So because this one does have higher portfolio options coverage, it probably would be slightly riskier than the other funds mentioned in a downward market, but it's clear overall the fund's done well, they've grown net asset value and have the potential to continue to do so moving forward, and also have some unique tax advantages. So there you go, those are 4 covered call ETFs that have the ability to continue to grow net asset value over time. Again, I'd encourage you to be very careful when investing in this asset class. And be sure to download the Dividendology covered call ETF database, as I think it will help guide some of your decisions. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.